Empezamos Barcelona Fashion Summit con visión internacional de la mano de Achim Berg. Achim es consultor y experto del sector de la moda y el lujo, lidera durante años la división global de apparel, moda y lujo de la consultora McKinsey, en la que trabajó cerca de 24 años, 14 de ellos como socio y socio senior. En la actualidad se dedica a asesorar empresas del sector de manera independiente. Achim abre la jornada con una charla en inglés titulada El cambio de paradigma. Thank you, Achim. The stage is yours. Opa.
Good morning. Thanks, Pilar, for the invitation. Thanks for the opportunity to share some insights on how the fashion industry has done in the past and what I and we expect where things are going to develop. So I'd like to set the stage a bit and look into some of the research I've done with my new think tank, Fashion Sites. The key question, obviously, for the conference is, why are we in a pivotal moment? And if you look at it from an aggregated level, things look quite fine. The fashion industry has 2.5 trillion sales. EBITDA margins are higher after the COVID pandemic than before. Luxury stocks had quite significant returns in the last 15 years, and the global wealth of the fashion elite has skyrocketed during that period. Fashion and luxury have increased with 4% CAGR since the financial crisis. Massively driven by sports, massively driven by luxury. And the industry has managed to weather a lot of storms in the past, starting with the Euro crisis, after the financial crisis, Rana Plaza, a Brexit referendum in the UK, trade conflicts, and a global pandemic with sales declines of 20 to 30%, and a moment where a lot of people in the industry thought things would have fundamentally changed. But the industry rebounded and also managed to deal with more recent challenges. And, surprise, surprise, the economic profit generated by the industry has increased by 7%, so 3 percentage points more CAGR during the last 15 years, and is significantly higher than it was before, because the industry did a lot of homework, cut costs, reduced the capital deployed. So what's actually the problem? Well, the problem is that this is the view from 20, 30,000 meters. If you take a closer look, if you look in certain segments, you see that the growth and the profitability is very polarized. So what we called the super winners in the State of Fashion report is the top 20 companies in the world that generate 113% of the economic profit, and a significant share of companies that are either flat in profitability or negative. The problem is that the apparel, let's call it consumption, in the developed world is stagnating. In most European markets, we haven't seen any proper growth in the last 15 years. And the problem is that the apparel, fashion, and luxury industry is accounting for 10% of the CO2 emissions, and hasn't really acted on that problem, and the regulator is now stepping up and is probably changing the game. So what I would like to do in my presentation, I would not only want to focus on the current state of fashion, I would like to take a look back and produce or provide some hindsight, understand what were the drivers for the industry in the last 15 years, and I would like to identify the patterns that we currently see, and then give you a sneak peek into what I expect will be the future drivers shaping this industry, and finish with some predictions where this industry is heading in the next 5 to 10 years. So let's start with hindsight. So what were the underlying drivers that shaped all of this, and how did the industry respond to it? There are economic drivers, there are industry drivers, and there are consumer drivers. If we start with economic drivers, we've actually seen a relatively favorable environment. And I'm going to go into that a bit deeper in a second. But we've also seen the stagnating growth that I was referring to. And we've seen that consumption has boosted in certain areas, but that the share of wallet of the industry is declining. So global GDP doubled in the period between 2010 and 2025. The developed markets accounted for 73% 15 years ago. They only account for 59% now. So the growth rate in the Western world, in the developed markets, so-called developed markets, is around 4%. Spain was at 3%, which means it's pretty much inflation of the last 15 years, while the developing markets are growing at 9%. So that is where the growth is happening. And that is also where the apparel consumption is happening, as we can see here on the next slide. So same thing here. Global consumer expenditure for apparel and footwear doubled in the last 15 years, but the developed markets are only accounting for 51% now. So not even the GDP share that you have seen before. And the reason for that is that the share of wallet, the percentage of spendings of the money available, is declining. It's declining in the developed markets from 4% to roughly 3%, but it's even declining in the emerging markets from 6% to nowadays 5%. So the challenging truth is that apparel and fashion are declining in relevance for consumers because they prefer to spend on travel, they prefer to spend on electronic gadgets, and they see fashion, in particular in the Western world, as a form of entertainment, and wardrobes are full. If we look at the industry drivers, we've seen that we benefited from a so-called sourcing deflation for several decades, which has turned a few years back. The internet has provided challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. We've seen some stunning business innovations. If you think about Zara, if you think about LVMH and Shein. But I think the reality is that a lot of the fashion industry processes are, unchanged, in particular at the back end in the 15 years period. ESG policies, we have a lot of talk, we don't have a lot of walk. And while the industry is complaining about the constraints, as a matter of fact, we haven't seen that many constraints. And I think the industry as such has benefited from a significant professionalization and sophistication, which has driven up the profitabilities. So, in more detail, manufacturing wages in China are now 3 times higher than they were in 2010. Import prices have increased by 10% in that period. And if you look at the right-hand side, you see the logistic costs, which obviously had a very tumultuous period during the pandemic, but they've settled on a significantly higher level, pretty much 3 times higher than they were before the pandemic. If we look at ESG, we had a period of creating awareness, which started around 2010. We had a lot of brave CEOs making brave commitments around 2020. But other than that, things haven't really fundamentally changed. And I think a lot of people, including myself, expect that this will change. If we look at consumer drivers, we see a certain polarization of consumers. There's a shrinking middle class, and there is a growing group of high net worth individuals. The world has gotten more digitized. The consumer is better informed than ever before. And we've seen a certain level of hedonism driving consumption in luxury, but also in health, in sports, and in wellness. And sustainability awareness is increasing, but the willingness to pay for it is still limited to non-existing. So, to illustrate that, the middle class was 73% according to a United Nations definition. It shrank now to 64%, and you see that the bottom part, less affluent people, has increased. And at the top end, which you can see on the right-hand side, the share of high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals has increased from 17 to 23%. That is an underlying driver why luxury has seen the boom that we have seen. Because a certain group of people has significantly more money available. And if we look at digitally influenced retail sales, it's an analysis from Gartner, you see that over the last 15 years in the United States, those sales have tripled in size. And that is driven by a lot of innovation at that end, mainly at the front end, which means the consumer-facing part of the usage of this technology. So, I think my conclusion from that is, when we take a bit of a broader view on those 15 years, that we have seen 5 fashion system shifts, and we see 5 sub-industry patterns. So we have the super winners take it all phenomenon. There is a group of companies that are performing extremely well, that are generating a lot of value for consumers, but also for the owners of those businesses. And there is a significantly and growing part of companies that is under pressure and is on a bit of a sliding scale. Social media rules, I think 15 years ago, published media for the fashion weeks was ruling. That has massively changed. We've seen an e-com revolution around 2010, and by now, for most players in the industry, online sales are at around 30%, with some exceptions at the discount level and at the top-end level. We've seen that the sourcing caravan has come to a halt, which was kind of the fuel for a lot of those developments, because the sourcing caravan moved from one country to the other, benefited from labor cost arbitrage, and things got cheaper and cheaper. That definitely has come to an end since 2016 and 17. Now prices are increasing, and ESG regulation will further increase those prices. And ESG has emerged. It was not a relevant topic in 2010. I think we have seen the first global fashion agenda in 2009. But as I said before, more talk than walk. If we look at the sub-industry patterns, we have a massive discount culture. Globally, the US has moved massively into a world where full price is more the exception from the rule. But also in Europe, we see that the discount share is going up, that markdowns are going up, that off-price has also massively benefited from a digitalization. We've seen a fast fashion evolution. So while it started even before 2000, we've seen a second and a third wave that I will focus on the next slides. And we've seen a massive mid-market squeeze. Yeah, a lot of the players in the mid-market, so between value at the bottom and premium one level higher, got squeezed, in particular the wholesale-driven businesses, because the price inflation allowed the value players to do a better offer, and the premium guys were selling less product at full price, and that is the result of the squeeze. The hedonism, the focus on health and wellness have pushed sports massively. Has become a huge industry on the brand side, but also on the retailing side. And yeah, luxury had an amazing surge. So after the democratization in the 2000s, they really got growth in the last 15 years. It's currently taking a break. And in my humble opinion, it's not only a cyclical break, it's also a structural break, because after COVID and the post-COVID spending period, we are now seeing a hangover of the consumers and a certain fatigue. So let's illustrate a bit my idea about the drivers and look into the fast fashion evolution. As I said before, pre-2000, we've seen the phenomenon happening on the high street. Zara is obviously a very impressive example for that. H&M was the counterpart that currently is not able to catch up anymore to Zara. And we've seen that the whole product development periods have shrinked. It moved, at least in some of those models, from pure push to at least a mixed push-pull model. And it was going all very well. Around 2010, we've seen a second wave, which was driven a lot by digital, by the digital platforms, by new ways of serving consumers. ASOS is a great example. Boohoo in the UK is another example for that. And in around 2020, we've seen the phenomenon of Shein and Temu, which in a way is the consequent next step after the digital platforms, because it's not only cutting out brands in between, it's going direct from manufacturer to the customers. And obviously also using the one or the other loophole on the regulatory side in order to achieve that. So if we look at the drivers that were enabling that, we see this customer desire for newness in social media that started with MTV, which a lot of the people in this room will still remember. But which now completely transformed into e-commerce, into social media, and the different ways how social media evolved from Facebook via Instagram now to TikTok. The sourcing deflation that I was talking about was fueling the whole trend in fast fashion. E-commerce and the technical capabilities to serve consumers were incredibly beneficial. And obviously also the globalization push we've seen in the last 15 years helped to move businesses like H&M from 1 billion in turnover in the early 2000s to 22 billion today. Zara from roughly the same size to 25 billion globally. ESG awareness and regulation so far have not really impacted the business. And if we look at the second and the third wave, we see that this allowed to change assortment planning to get much faster. This allowed the platform model, and it pushed a direct to consumer proposition. The third wave is turning it even more because it completely moves from push to pull. It massively increases the product choice. A lot of the product only exists digitally until it's ordered. That is what really pull is about. It creates urgency because whether we like it or not, the front end of Shein is very well done and has massively outperformed competition. and it moves into a manufacturer to consumer approach. So there's underlying drivers that allowed certain business models and that explain why we have seen what we have seen. If we now look into what does it mean for the future, I would like to apply the same logic. So we look at the current drivers and we see that the customer needs and social media, I think that is unchanged. There was a moment when we thought that next day delivery was the only way to satisfy customer needs. That has proven to be wrong. There is a constant stream of newness generated through social media. People have a bit of a fatigue. So I cannot necessarily see that this will further increase. Sourcing deflation has turned into sourcing inflation. So it is getting more expensive to source product, which is a challenge for those business models. Digitization and tech capabilities, most of those players are still at the forefront, but the rest of the industry is definitely catching up. Restrictions on global trade, well, let's see what the new US administration is doing on the tariff side. And ESG awareness and regulation, well, we might take a pause at the moment, but I'm deeply convinced that we are seeing a cultural shift which will drive the relevance of ESG. If I look at my kids, they will be different consumers than what their parents were actually doing. And we should also expect that we will get regulation that will close the loopholes. So the duty avoidance and the tax avoidance of some of the Chinese models, I strongly believe will come to an end. I cannot see that Mr. Trump is allowing that to happen going forward, which will also then put more pressure on the European administration. And also the fact that we have product coming into the European Union that in no way complies with the rules of the European Union also will come to an end. So what does it mean for the second and the third, but also for the first wave of the players? So the first one is the need for differentiation and curation. It's not good enough just to put product out and to put even more product out. So the different platforms, the different players need to create value for the consumers, and they need to differentiate from the vast offer that we have anyway. I strongly believe we see more consolidation, in particular on the value and mid-market platforms. Zalando has already taken over About You, and we have seen similar developments at the top end with Yoox, Net-a-Porter, Matches, and Farfetch. So we will see more of that. As I said, the regulatory loopholes will be closed, maybe faster than some think, and the increase in cost and the continuous market pressure and the non-existent organic growth in the market will also squeeze profitability. We will also see an end of greenwashing because the consumers are not stupid and they can differentiate between a nice story and some realities, as we've seen it in other parts. So the consequence of that is, if you look out 5 to 10 years, that fast fashion will be under significantly more pressure, and I currently can't see where a fourth wave should come from. But let's be humble, because 5 years ago we all thought fast fashion had already come to an end after the second wave, and then Shein and Temu proved us wrong. So if I apply that logic, looking into the drivers, looking into how the businesses have coped with that in the past and how things will go forward, let me do some bold predictions. So I'm German in the end, so I need to be bold. Yeah. And here are 10 for you, so which could stimulate the one or the other discussion. I love the fact that all the iPhones are going up now. So the first one is growth. Growth will only happen in pockets, in niches, and driven by certain trends. There is no organic growth. The footfall in the high streets that is gone will not come back. And the consequence is you either be able to benefit from those niches, or you need to find your growth in the developing markets, because there is the growth happening. The second one is polarization. It will continue. There's no obvious reason why it would not, because if you look at the super winners, and you can even take it a bit broader, the top 50 companies in the industry, they got all the profitability, they got all the means to compete on whatever they need to compete on. Digitization, sustainability, regulation, while a lot of other businesses are subcritical. So you need some critical mass in order to compete in this industry, or you need to be positioned in a niche that allows you to be competitive. Fast fashion, I already alluded on. I think we've seen the biggest impact of fast fashion. It doesn't mean that a clever business model like Zara and Inditex will not thrive, but the general passion for fast fashion is probably evading a bit. We've seen a massive mid-market squeeze, where we now see that vertical mid-market players like Zara, my friends from Mango, but also Next and Marks & Spencer are actually doing well. And you could hope that a certain consolidation in that space has already happened. So I personally expect that the squeeze is moving one level up into premium. That is where we have a lot of subcritical, wholesale-driven small players, and they are facing similar challenges that the mid-market players have seen before. Luxury is here to stay. The hedonism will not go away. The growing middle classes in the developing markets will grow. It's taking a pause. It needs to find something to become relevant again, and it needs a change. AI, yeah, there's a lot of talk about AI. It's real. It's happening. It's not like the metaverse. It's because it really has impact, in particular on the back end. And it's a great opportunity for this industry to streamline and to improve processes and to drive productivity, and through that, secure profitability. Nearshoring will finally become relevant. Yeah? We're talking about that for at least 10 years, 15 years. But the business model changes have not happened to the extent that businesses would be brave enough to do more nearshoring. With all the regulation and ESG, that will change. ESG, yes, it's also taking a pause. And if you see some of the political developments, you wonder whether it's all going back to where it started. I don't think so. I have a strong belief in my kids and into the younger cohorts and generations. And online and offline, it's another interesting one we're talking about for so long. Let's face it, most businesses are still multi-channel and not omni-channel. And the convergence of the two is actually what makes the difference. And that is a bit more than just having a screen and some cool videos in a store. So also that I expect to happen. And then we're going to have competition for talent. Because it's nowadays already difficult to get people for retail stores. It's difficult to get tech talent to work for mid-sized fashion businesses. So that part will not get easier, and that means the fashion industry needs to make sure that they are an attractive employer, because the general fascination for fashion is unbroken. Thanks a lot for your attention, and have a great conference.